So Enric is from Prensoland SA. So Enric worked in different industrial environments, either in the technical or the marketing management or for multinational groups or private companies in the automotive, food, metal treatment and automation manufacturing activities in the Spain, UK and Slovenia. In precast concrete, he has worked for 10 years in the development and the homologation of pre-stressed concrete elements for floors according to the international codes, with participation in the Spanish Mirror Technical Committee for the revision of the Eurocode 2. Based in Barcelona, Spain, he is currently assigned to the definition and the startup of full precast concrete hubs at the company Prensoland SA. So we have with us Enric Solsona.
Hello. Thank you for inviting me. My regards to all the attendants. I would love to be here presently next time so we can share the good coffee breaks. The presentation is quite a challenge because we assume that the precast has challenges and that we need to overcome them, okay? Now, the first question is, if you agree to this, how big is the challenge and what is the nature of these challenges? So first, we are aware that anything which can be built in situ can be executed, can be installed with precast concrete elements. So in terms of available market or potential market, nothing is changing, but we must be aware, as we talk about challenges, of the size of this challenge. When we start considering the investment, we must think, in our opinion, from the beginning in precast, not translating from casting in situ to precast, because we must adapt to the needs of each market in terms of social traditions, technology levels, or in economic situation. So everything we execute in precast must be adapted to their local conditions. One is very clear. For instance, the seismicity of certain areas. When we build in seismic zones, we must adapt to the codes, the traditions, but as well to the safety rules. We believe that the vectors, the driving vectors of the decisions we make in precast are basically the scale of what we want to do, the building method that we choose to execute the precast, and as a result of the other two, what is the equipment that we need to acquire? One question is always present is whether precast is interesting, attractive for investment. And just to give a quick input, if we go from left to right and we consider the aggregates and the business of aggregates, and then we consider that by putting these aggregates together with cement and we sell ready mix instead of components, and then we precast this concrete and so forth, we easily see that if we tie to the cost of the cement or the selling price of the cement, sorry, if it is bulk, if it is sold as ready mix or as the same cement is sold as pre-stressed concrete, for instance, the value of this material is increasing. So it is already an input of whether we are on the interesting and attractive activity or not. We believe that when we are facing this investment, we must work in three important points, which is the awareness, the know-how of the new activity, how we react to these challenges, and of course, we must always have figures in hand, ratios, big numbers, which help us making the decisions. So we must acquire the detailed know-how to solve the unawareness. We must identify the problems, the mistakes which can avoid, because basically what we want is to control our profit. So let's forget the limitations on the available market. So let's get rid of any factor which is reducing our available market, and let's get as many tools as required to control the execution in time and costs. As we said, we must always think in precast on all the operations, from the design to the erection and commission. Awareness is important because the unawareness is translated in a perception of risk. And then the question is, why investing if we identify this activity as a risk? The picture is just to illustrate something which is clear, which is in the past in Europe, it was possible to make walls in that way. From the river, you take the stones, but today it would be impossible because we don't have masonry who can build this wall possibly. So we must accept as well that gradually, in a more or less volume and a higher or lower speed, precast is imposing itself. Opposite to that, I mean, if you are aware, then you control the risk and you may decide to go for the investment. Awareness, in just a picture, we can see things like how the safety is considered, what are the kind of elevation means required, what are the pickup points, how is the finish of the surface, how are the connections, whether it is semi-rigid or it is rigid. Or, I mean, just a picture is telling so many things. We see pre-stressed elements as well on the roofs. That's what we want to get. So we anticipated before already that the three vectors are the scale of what we want to do, what is the building system selected to proceed with it, and then what is the equipment required to produce the precast concrete elements. With a key concept as well, we are in Pune now, so instead of building something in the center of Pune and bringing the materials there, imagine we have the factory in Chakan. So the materials must go to Chakan, and from Chakan we will send the elements to the sites. So it's two steps, and there is a new business associated, which is the figure of the precaster. The precaster who is producing in a controlled area, the factories, the elements that will be required at the sites. This is a complete map of the concepts which we deal with when we consider a building. And we identify some of them which are different from casting place. On the left, we see that we must identify the elements. Elements is a word that never appears in casting place. We are considering the factory capacity and the sizing and the layout and the equipment selection. So we see already words and terms which are not used in casting place. Again, we are talking about the awareness and how we react, how we position ourselves before these challenges. We believe that we need software tools to proceed with precast, and these software tools are dedicated tools, meaning that it must be something which is not the addition of different softwares, but it must be a package which is helping, which is controlling in the complete workflow. Again, from the design of the elements, the structure, the logistics, and the assembly at the site. This software is giving you basically control. Control is a magic word in investment. So all the elements are identified. There is a traceability on everything you are doing. So let me insist on that. The control is there from the project itself, the drawings which are in progress, the progress which are the drawings which are accepted, the elements which are in production, and that gives you the necessary control, the tool required to make sure that in the lead time you are executing everything. Let's go a little bit deeper in the concept of the three vectors. When we say scale and equipment, that means that depending on the carpet area, you would go for an investment in some kind of products or the others. For instance, if it is for floors in pre-stressed concrete, unless you have a demand of 50,000 square meters per year, it would be very hard to justify your investment in this kind of factory. There are other ways of producing precast elements, which is in carousels. The carousels, which have a very high capacity, but as well, you must fit the installation, meaning that you must guarantee that in 3, 4, 5 minimum years, you will have the enough demand as to justify the investment. Opposite to that, if you have just a table where you want to cast reinforced concrete walls, you can make one wall per day, and that the scale of your job is different, therefore the means required for it is less. Why the equipment and the building system? It depends. If you are making towers and you are making moment-resisting frames with beams and columns, then you need one kind of mold. If you are making shear walls, that's another one. And of course, depending on how we execute the partition walls, then a different equipment is required. For instance, for partitions, the battery molds. Why building system and scale? Well, there is a ratio of at least 2 to 1 in surface between walls and floors. So that is giving you as well of the volume of what you have to produce, and therefore that helps you defining the building system and equipment. We know that in India, for instance, up to G+3, in seismic zones, it is possible to build with load-bearing walls. So here, the size of what we want to execute and the building system are associated, and so forth. I mean, with so many other combinations. Now, these are our general concepts about what happens with our own decision. I mean, how we position ourselves in this frame situation. Well, the challenge, as we said, size is important, but how we want to behave as investors and to what level of integration. That means, do we have to concentrate in just products, and we just say products, and we load the products on trucks and we send them to the sites? Or we rather prefer to integrate to the utmost level to deliver finished structures as a developer. And that graph with the two axes defining myself are important also for ourselves to identify, to understand how we want to play. It is important that when we are precasting concrete elements, we realize that the mix of products must be interesting because some are oriented to margin and they are giving good contribution margin. The others, maybe even if they have a lower margin, they might be interesting to buy better. I mean, the moment you have volume, then you can source better your materials. And another point important is that your factory is not stopped. I mean, it is a key issue. Monday morning, the factory manager, what does he have to do? He must have a program. He must have a calendar of production so that, again, we reach the lead time. And every day we reproduce the required elements according to a building sequence. The elements, if we consider the investment in precast as a precaster of elements, not of finished structures. The elements can be of different kinds, and it would be wise in our understanding to select those which make sense together, if possible. If it's beam and columns, or if I'm more in the building of hangars, for instance, then we will go for variable beams or delta beams and elements for floors to produce a surface for destinated to offices, for instance. But see, anything can be precast. This is now immersion to the figures. It seems it's complicated. There are many lines, but the most important thing is to illustrate that in the investment, part of the investment is fixed and part is variable. So in this case, I don't know, if we are making floors, there will be part of the floors which will be fixed. It is the hangar, the shed, the land, this is fixed, and then the cost in equipment is variable depending on how many machines of different kinds are you buying. Then the lines for the turnover are overlapping the lines for the costing. And the main purpose of that graph is to realize that it might well be that we reach the break-even point with a higher investment than in a lower investment. It's no secret. It's just because we are selling more. This is realistic. It is happening. It's not just nice to put on a graph. So as we said ourselves, okay, who am I? What is the starting point? And what do I want to achieve? Say, the numbers are just approximated. The important is the masses, the global percentages of the exercise. On the left, in white, black and white, we have a simulation of the investor. He's an investor which is already related to concrete. He's making whatever part, and he considers case A, the production of reinforced concrete solid slabs. We are trying to show here what would be, again, a simulation, a tentative profit and loss sheet with direct costing, if an investment of 100 lakh rupee is made, and what would be the additional sales. One important, or a few important ratios or figures are important here. We believe that in concrete, gross margins above 40% are very much realistic in any case. It is higher if, precisely in the situation of an investor already related to concrete, you are just adding additional products with additional equipment because the operatings are increased very little. Case B would be another option. I'm an investor related to concrete, and then I consider, for instance, pre-stressing. Pre-stressing means another level of investment, but as well are adding, most probably, a higher amount in turnover. The return of the investment in terms of cash flow generated as amortizations plus net benefit, this is the cash flow, and then we compare to the investment, and that is giving you the number of years, is of that range. It's not that we want to gamble with the numbers. This is the reality of what we are experiencing with our customers. If you say, okay, instead of a precaster, I want to grow, I want to go for a full precast plant. I want to make everything. And then another case is everything but fully automated. That would be a rough approach of the level of investment and the resulting sales of that exercise. Again, the return period is not reaching, in our opinion, the 4 years. Provided, of course, that the sales are there. I mean, that we didn't make mistake in our definition of the available market. So I'm recapitulating a little bit the presentation. The awareness must cover different topics. We don't want to miss anyone so that we make the correct decision. All these topics are necessary. I mean, how we solve the foundations, how we deal with the stability and the modulation of the buildings from the beginning, thinking in precast. And then lifting means you had a very nice presentation before. How is the availability of the manpower? I think every time is less. It's not in India, it's in many countries. I mean, there are people crying in Europe because they cannot find qualified labor. We must mention the mechanical, the electrical, and the plumbing elements are integrated from the factory, so this must be solved as well already from the factory, how we deal with the logistics, and then with all these elements we are mentioning here. What means proactivity? I mean, how we react upon all this situation is we must find our situation in the market. We must identify, if you remember this presentation, with the two axes, which is more oriented to product, it's more oriented to full precast structure. Or I'm more oriented to one volume or less volume. We must foresee already sustainability. I mean, the precast is sustainable by itself. Moreover, if we consider pre-stress, because we are using less steel and concrete. But as well, we must start considering things like the isolation in not just walls, but as well roofs and how we use materials for that. Because today's presentation is about advanced precast, so we want to use elements which are not old or they are not legacy before we start. We must, in our opinion, to challenge with this investment, offer as much versatility as possible, more in a country that is not used to use precast. So we must be ready for anything. If we make an investment for reinforced concrete walls and we don't have orders for precast for reinforced concrete walls, what do we do then? But if the factory is prepared, it's much better. Another point of seeing that is one day you make an investment and you make a tour to your factory 1 year later, and then you say, why did I buy that thing? So you must, if possible, as mentioned in the next point, it will be an ideal case where 30% of the molds used, 30% of the molds, of all the possible molds you can imagine, can be used in 70% of the cases. That would be a good ratio. So, example, how we can achieve that. The presentation of Sencon is referring to the high demand of social housing. Social housing we can execute most probably with load-bearing walls. So with a few molds in load-bearing walls, we can use them in at least 70% of the cases where you have an inquiry to make this kind of buildings. If we can standardize, if we can stand on standardization, much better. And in Europe and in other places, I think in India as well, there are a standard size. So that is helping a lot. And we believe that keeping the key services in-house is an advantage. I mean, try to avoid the subcontracting on that. About the numbers again, the financial approach. We believe that gross margin 50% should be a reasonable target, and that the total operating costs should not reach 30% of the turnover. As we said before, the return of this investment, here we are not considering the internal tax of return in these financial terms because the return is short term. So we believe should be in 2-3 years. As this activity is generating sales immediately, that the challenge, to be more specific, is the treasury, how we deal with the treasury. And then I'm sure you will have many more ideas and probably better than these, but let me mention a few ones. Short-term leverages with the supply chain, how we can deal the payment terms with the suppliers. If we are paying the equipment with LC, can this maturity be extended in a way? Because the moment we are selling and we are invoicing and we are receiving the payments, that is paying for everything by itself. So trying to reduce the peaks of required working capital is crucial here. So how we solve this working capital, then we are mentioning if there are temporary partners, if we offer them a participation in the benefits. And it is important, we mentioned that before, when we talked about the marketing mix, that we concentrate in high value precast concrete elements, but as well that items like, for instance, the lintels for the doors and windows, other or fencings, elements which can produce in the same factory, changing easily with the mold, could be beneficial. For instance, if you put the lintels in a truck which is carrying the walls, you put these lintels in a corner and you are not paying transport for this. But they are helping you to keep the factory alive and building every day. So I think this is all from me today. And I'm thanking you for your attention.
Thank you, Enric, for a quite concise presentation.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.